My name is Shadrad. I am the owner and founder of REsimpli, and we do these weekly mastermind calls, bring on a special guest to share their experience, everything that they're doing that's working for them, where we get to learn from them. So today we have Scott. Scott, welcome to our call. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing really good, man. Doing really
Yeah.
good. You have a fascinating story, so I'm excited to jump into it. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? Kind of what market do you invest in? Just a little bit about your real estate background.
Yeah, so I'll start. So graduated college back in 2012, a couple of teaching degrees. Ended up doing that for 4 years and basically got into real estate investing with my first paycheck, bought two houses on one lot. And I just, had too much student loans, couldn't afford anything. So I was like, well, let me try to offset it with some income so I can, get a larger, nicer house. And then found Bigger Pockets podcast after that and kind of got that bug then. Had a contracting background too, so I was handy. So I did kind of my own stuff. Bought a next REO single family in 2016. Swung the hammer on that one, did everything, and then got my real estate license. Did another flip with some buddies, and then as I was teaching, I was trying to get pulled from real estate. Ended up getting a non-renewed teaching contract, and I was like, sucked at first, but perfect blessing in disguise would push me over to real estate investing full time and having a license. So I was taking all that active income and trying to buy more rentals with it. And then when COVID happened, saw another great opportunity and really kicked it up a notch and just kept buying, moving mostly from single family into small multifamily, commercial, condos. Now we're doing like mid-size multifamily, 10 to 20 unit stuff, and also doing small subdivisions. So having a house with excess land, going through the full process, getting approved and selling that. So now we manage our own rentals. I have one full-time employee. We try to keep everything in-house and looking to grow from there. So, it's been a long, good process, learned a bunch. And yeah, so it's been fun.
And what market did you say you invest in?
So we're in Central Connecticut. Yeah, born and raised. Everybody
Okay.
knows UConn. We're right by UConn. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So that's the only
Yeah.
market that you invest in. You're in that
Yep.
local to your market.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's I did a bunch of real estate courses on, market analysis and investing and, got to such a high level. I was like, well, picking the best markets in the United States and kind of quickly realized I had to pick a path where it was, keeping 100% ownership in the company and focusing on 1 to 3 towns and becoming the absolute expert. And having my real estate license gave me that a competitive advantage where I knew exactly what a 3,100 square foot would sell for and what condition. And walking clients through houses, I knew exactly what they wanted. So once an opportunity posted, it really came in handy just knowing within an hour of being on the MLS, I could be like, okay, here's my offer. So yeah, I've kind of taken that step back from, okay, let me think about syndication and partnerships and investing in the best, states in the country to, all right, where am I an expert and can I, fit what I want for my financial freedom? And that's where we're
Hmm.
at now. So
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. And did you always have an interest in real estate, or the goal was you have some passive income and then you happen to choose real estate as your investment of choice? You had a full-time job. Like, how did the interest in real estate or other investment come about?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of forced into just not being able to afford a single family home with on a teaching, salary of 43,000 plus another 60, 70 grand in student loans. I couldn't afford anything. And I always had a deal of like, okay, well, how can I, right? And that was just the one opportunity, saw one house, made one offer and got the deal and kind of found out that way that, okay, there's something here. And then obviously bigger pockets, seeing all that you can accomplish and kind of just haphazardly fell into it that way and just always been a creative person in terms of seeing something, seeing an opportunity that no one else can see and then me trying to figure it out.
What was the biggest challenge for you? Like, unfortunately, teachers don't make a lot of money. So what was the biggest challenge for you transitioning to real estate investment? Was it the finances part? Was it the mindset part? Because I feel like sometimes, we're our biggest enemies. So what was the biggest challenge for you?
Yeah, I would say the financing, because when I got the non-renewed teaching contract, I was refinancing that REO I purchased with hard money, and that was my first experience with hard money. So if I could figure out the financing, more often than not, I call myself a debt investor, right? Like if I can get really cheap debt, then I could pay more for the next guy, depending on your outlook, how long you're going to hold it, what your cash flow is, what the management is. So once I found out all the Fannie Freddie regulations and how to work within those guidelines, which are always changing, then I can get 10 finance properties. And then after that, it's like, okay, well, there's other, debt service coverage ratio. So that kind of pushed me into lending, where I started more of like brokering those type of loans as well. So if I could figure out the construction, the investment and the rental side of it, and then the finance side of it, then I can handle the whole process and just kind of plug and play those numbers.
So did you go the route of like getting the first 10 loans? I have an investor that I work with. So what he did was he got 10 loans in his name, including a primary, and then 10 loans in his wife's name to max out
Mhm.
the 20 properties. And now he's looking into a line of credit. So how did you grow beyond that, the 10 loans limit?
Yeah, so I've even sold houses to my wife before. So I've done some creative things where I couldn't qualify because I left teaching, but she was still a teacher. So my LLC, just we rehabbed the property, sold to her, and did creative financing that way, where we just closed another Fannie Freddie loan. So I like to keep, and I've sold a bunch, right? I had a bunch of great debt, but then making 200 to 500 bucks a single family just didn't really work. It was just too much time for too little. So then I started playing in that 10 to 20 unit space, where now you can get a lot better cash flow, even though the leverage on a commercial loan is not as great. It's a 5 or 10 year arm with a balloon. It's the worst. I hate it. So I just trying to, and then from there you figure out, okay, well, there's government financing with longer terms and better. So you're in this little medium space that's not that great. Where again, I had a bunch of Fannie Freddie debt at 3 and 4% on investor loans, which was awesome. But I had a lot of equity once the market increased. So now my return on the equity wasn't so great. So I swapped it out for bigger stuff. So I kind of keep those for things that, we're going to hold this 4 unit for 10, 15, 20 years and put it to bed. But that painstaking process of refinancing and going to debt to income ratios and figuring out all that. Like for now, my wife just decided to stay home. We have 2 kids. So now that's just going to knock us out of Fannie Freddie completely. So it's not the worst end of the world. And then I just do, hard money and 30-year debt on the, bank statement loans. You're
Got
paying
it.
0.5% to 1% higher, but you still have that opportunity. So that's my debt. That's what I underwrite to. If it doesn't work, then move on to the next property.
How are you finding these properties?
MLS, all
MLS,
MLS. Yep.
you're buying everything on
No.
MLS, you're still able to get pretty good deals.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you got to be quick. Obviously, if you have great relationships with other agents, that's huge, because they know you can close and things like that. So I know how to present a great offer. If they know me, it's better. If it's a great deal, someone's going to probably pay higher. Again, my last single family flip that we're rehabbing right now had asbestos, insulation pipes throughout the entire house, had a giant mold issue, and had an in-ground oil tank. So there wasn't that many buyers that, you had to take it as is with a large deposit. And I'm like, oh, I'm comfortable with that. You still find deals, but I think it's definitely a lot more difficult than it was. I found being an agent, knowing where I could push the value where no one else could be that high of an ARV. I can see it, and our product is that much better, where we rehab, everything's quality, everything's permits pulled, done right. So
Yeah. What's the ARV for your average like property that you're flipping?
in the threes, yeah. So, and this is where I learned the best from Jay Scott, where awesome book on flipping houses is, you want to find that bell curve of where all your
Okay.
first time home buyers are. So we're flipping in that median. I don't The stuff that's junk that's sub 100 is short ceilings, weird, funky layouts. Like I just don't even touch that stuff. And then the opposite is like I'm not flipping six, seven, $800,000 houses because when I built my house, I built an awesome house, but I saw what the profit margin could be. It could be great, but the holding costs would just destroy that deal
Right.
if the market changed or you went over budget. With a $300,000 house, you could just eat that extra cost and keep it as a rental and it'd still hold itself. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds very similar to the investment strategy that we had. Like the one house that I can think of where we lost significant amount of money was we're in the price range about 200 to 250 is our sweet spot of ARV. And we bought one house that was going to be worth about 700. And this was like right when the interest rate started going up.
Hmm.
And we ended up losing primarily because of the holding cost, about 50 to $60,000 on that. So that was like, yeah, you need to stick in your lanes and just do what's working. It looks
Hmm.
like a really good opportunity, but it's out of our swim lane. So we pass on that now. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
worked really well for us. So is your primary goal to just buy more passive rental properties, flip, or like, how are you kind of generating? Are you looking at multiple streams of income? What are you doing with that?
Yeah. And I think there's different stages for where you are. If you're a brand new investor, I think the smartest thing is to try to wipe out your housing costs. It's your most expensive bill, not the coffee, not the Wi-Fi and like all the cars. Like, I mean, car payment's ridiculous now, but I mean, you try to wipe out that, then you have a lot more freedom to move up from there. And I feel like the next stage is, you know, having a family, having a home, and now your debt per month is just so much higher. So then I think it's wiping that out. And then I feel like the next stage is, getting your dream car, your dream vacation home and things like that. And then after that, it's, to me,
How
there's a stopping point of happiness.
So
So,
how would you go about,
um,
like in my personal opinion, someone who's starting out, the best thing they can do is to buy like house hack and buy a 4 unit, especially if you're in a
yep.
market that allows FHA financing. What would you say on that? So like someone who's starting out and they're looking to, start into real estate investing, they, maybe don't own a home right now, or they do, what would you suggest would be the best way for them to go? Best route.
Yeah, definitely a 4 unit. You have to take advantage of low down payment, cheap rate government financing. Once you can get that, like I said, you can start with that 4 unit, and typically you can work your way from a 4 to a 3 to a 2 to a 1, and then you can stick with like a low 5% conventional product up to those 10 Fannie Freddie loans. And the reason I think that's great is because most people are probably making between that 50 and 100,000, and to save up 25%, it's near impossible in my eyes. Obviously there might be a better strategy, but I have yet to find one from a safer standpoint of having inspections and having appraisal and having financing. So you're kind of protected in a bubble where if you buy a flip as is from a bank with no disclosures, we have a huge issue in the Northeast with failing foundations. They're 185K to replace. So you
Wow.
could easily buy one of those as is and you get totally wiped out. So I like recommending when I work with investors on the agent side, house hacking definitely the the best route, I think. Because once you get that first house and you live there for a year, you're going to learn management, you're going to learn repairs, you're going to start getting everybody in your Rolodex from, contractors to HVAC, electrical. And then once you have that, you're going to understand rental comps when you post them. You're going to see what tenants want in that local area, and that helps you so much with the next one, the next low down payment loan. And you just, you see how that looks, how the market changes over time, and then you can adjust. But yeah, that's the best approach. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you've done enough deals, once you looked at enough properties, then how much you could rent this property for, how much you could sell that property for. And there's still like we're buying properties from MLS. We literally are actually closing a deal today from MLS that was listed on MLS. And there was some bidding back and forth on it, but we were able to get that deal. Do you have any tips for investors that don't have like high marketing budget to find some good deals on MLS? Like, what have you done? You're a licensed real estate broker and you're buying everything from MLS. Like, what are some of the things you've learned that have worked for you?
So our last two deals, perfect example, is just staying in it at your price where, they obviously they'll post it extremely high. It'll sit because you're overpriced for the condition it's in. And then you'll have someone get it and then try to negotiate the price down further after inspections. Typically, you'll make the seller mad, or something will happen, and then you say, hey, I might not be the highest offer, but I'm here, I'm
Right,
consistent, just, and it's not emotional, right? And that's how I present the offer. It's like, this is a business transaction, I'm super easy to work with. Use a very large non-refundable deposit, typically like 15,000 will get the job done around here. And I'm like, hey, if I can't close it, keep it, right? And then I'll just stay in that pocket touching base. So I think one of the biggest advantages, I think the historical back on market right now is like in the teens, like 16, 17% of deals come
oh
back
wow.
on market.
is
Yeah,
that
so it's
is
actually
that
pretty
Connecticut
high.
or
Yeah.
nationwide?
I think that was nationwide. I think the realtor.com or someone or NAR put that out.
Wow.
And I was like, and I've been personally
It's
seeing a
one out
lot.
of
And I think
six
it's,
properties. That's
yeah, yeah, yep.
yeah. That's
Pretty crazy. And it
yeah.
might be buyer's remorse. It might be something that they didn't see on the initial walkthrough. So once that comes back on market, depending on, what the sell, if they need to sell, they might accept a lower offer that's easier to work with. So I kind of just stay in there, being fast to work with, trying to beat out a highest and best situation, which is always, if you're a great listing agent, you always push towards that. Typically, you're going to get the best offer. But again, the seller might not want to go through that whole process. And if they know what they want, they'll accept it and it's a guaranteed closing, they might take less. Look for mismanaged or misleading properties where you can, figure out that it was like a legal in-law that they didn't post, or if it was a duplex and they posted as a
Right.
single, look for that. Not all agents are created equal. The bar to entry is extremely low. Everybody knows an agent. So they might not post it with the best agent. They might post it with a family friend who does 1 to 2 deals a year that might not know what the value is. So yeah, just in things that have been on market just for 90 days, I'd say. If it's been on longer, typically you might have a stubborn seller that doesn't need to sell. So, just looking outside the box too.
Right. Yeah, and then you're so right about following up. We have another MLS deal locked up where we made an initial offer and the seller didn't accept it, but just every other week we just kept following up with the agent. And you never know, the seller situation changes, it happens all the time. They might have a leak in the roof, their furnace might stop working, their AC might stop working, and they're like, oh, I don't want to deal with this anymore. But you just stick to your numbers, you keep following up, and the crazy things can happen. I'm curious, since you're an agent, and this is something we do in our market, we don't work with the buyer's agent. We work always with the listing agent because the properties that we're buying, like the one we closed on today, I think it's for like 90 or 95,000. And then typically some of the other properties will buy, like we have another one under contract for 40 or 50,000, needs 100,000 and repaired. But so there's not a lot of commission the agents are making on these because of the low price point. What are your thoughts on working with the listing agent and have the listing agent represent you as the buyer also, and then gives you a little bit of advantage because now the listing agent is making both sides of the commission rather than splitting, especially on a lower price property. Is that something
Yeah.
you guys are doing in your market, or you represent yourself as the buyer's agent?
So it's a conflict of interest too. Like in my market, I won't work with another investor, but that's only like 1 to 3 towns, right? Like someone whose experience is me, who knows the deals, we're going to be competing for the same contract. So I try not to get like in between that, right? So I think there's a stance. It's like, okay, well, in these markets, these type of deals, I just, I represent myself. Outside of that, I really like working with first time house hackers. One, we're looking at properties that are finished. So instead of that 50 to $100,000 house, we're looking at $400,000 duplex or triplex where I'm going to get paid decently. And I also like helping out first time home, investors. I was a teacher. I like that, like kind of giving back in a sense, but also getting paid at the same time. And then two, I like creating long time relationships, right? I have clients where I bought 4, 5, 6, 7 houses with, right? And when they do look to sell, I'll help them out in the deal. So there's that kind of relationship long term where they could always hit me up in between a 2 year buying, selling, and I'll still give them comps. I'll still pull comp, like I'll still help them out. Um, but yeah, I think especially with the changing laws coming up mid-August, that I think it's a good strategy in the sense of if the seller's now not going to offer a buyer's representation or any buyer's commission. I've yet to see how it's going to change the market, but I think it's going to change things where I think that strategy might be helpful, especially on the 50 to 100,000. That's not even worth the time.
Right.
Like it's just there's too much paperwork for too little less money to not be paid out. And as you know, as an investor, how many offers are you write before you actually get a deal? It's a
Right.
lot of time and effort to not be paid. So I take more of like the rifle approach now, where it's very specific, ready to buy, and as opposed to trying to get 10 buyers.
Got
Buyers
it.
are extremely tough in this market still.
Yeah. Right. Kevin has a question for you. A little late to the call,
Mhm.
so may not apply to you, but being an agent also, do you find yourself being pulled away from your investment side of the business because that pays the monthly bills, aka spending time with folks buying or selling a home? Like, how do you juggle between being an investor versus an agent?
It's always a struggle, and I still like even now it's changing again, right? With my wife staying home, now I need to produce more as an agent. So it's pivoting back towards that. But again, with like the larger real estate deals I'm doing. So right now, I bought an old Masonic Hall. It's a 100-year-old building, 20,000 square feet. We're doing 18 apartments plus my new office space and 45 storage lockers over 3 floors. So like a development deal like that is all mornings. My architect, my engineers, the town all work your normal day job hours. Town meetings typically 7 o'clock at night if you need to go for a zoning change, approvals, things like that. Where if you're on the real estate agent side, most of it's nights and the weekends. So you have to kind of create that balance. And then during the day, having the flexibility to get out and go see a property is awesome. So I think if you're gonna create any type of job, like that's an awesome relationship, I feel. Yeah, there's times where it's difficult, but I try to take the active income and then meet our monthly needs, and anything above that goes back into rentals. Very little, I'm very small in the stocks, 99% rest in real estate.
Got it. Yeah. Kevin, if you have any follow-up question, please put that in chat or unmute yourself. So question about the deal, that the development deal that you just purchased.
Mhm.
Congratulations on that, by the way. How are you
Thanks.
raising money for that? Do you have other private lenders, family and friends, or still able to find some government funding on that?
So again, creative process, and like this is definitely out of my wheelhouse, and in comfortability, dollar amount, construction costs. It's brand new to me to play in that world. Where the architect fees alone are over 100 grand. But I'll just give you quick numbers. So the building itself is 20,000 square feet. I bought it for 350, but there was no parking for the project to get approved. I had a I owned the property one parcel over, so I was like, I'll use offsite parking, right? I'll just figure out as I go. So it's kind of a wild ride to get it approved. I definitely took a risk, but it's a gorgeous building built well. So once I get that, so I sold 3 properties to buy that in cash because I couldn't go to the bank and be like, well, here's my ideas. They'd be like, okay, 20% loan to value. So I said, once I can get it cash, then I could take my time to get the approvals, figure it out. And now once I have the approvals, a property typically approved is worth $20,000 a unit. So you can do quick math on having that equity. And now I use that equity in the down payment for the construction loan. So then I bought the property next door for the parking, which was another 395, but we did seller financing. And I sold another single family for the down payment in that. So basically the whole while is once I get
Oh, that's
approvals,
super creative. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a wild ride. But some good has come out of it so far. Like I'm negotiating my first cell phone tower lease. which is just printing money in my eyes. So there's some things that have come out. The bad side of it is I haven't seen a penny of cash flow. And this year is extremely tight in terms of like money. Like I'm like, where'd my money go? I'm like, oh, okay, architects, engineers, town approval, taxes, insurance, all those things add up. So it's definitely has extremely difficult times. But again, I go back and remember to my first flip, doing all the rehab myself and trying to figure out hard money. And it was like $100,000 purchase with $30,000 rehab. And I'm like, that felt like crazy to me. So, but now I can do those like sleeping. They're blink of eye. They're non-emotional. I don't care about them. I can do three at the same time. Whereas this, I've had that same feeling of like drinking from a water hose. But I'm hoping that once I get it done and get it stabilized, one, the cash will be phenomenal. It'll be a great long-term asset that I'll never sell. And I'm hoping that education during that process will allow me to do more of those deals, right? So taking the good with the bad and, learning as I go.
So just if you can quickly walk through the numbers. So you purchase it for 350, and
Yep.
then how much will you put into this property, and what will it be worth once you're done with it?
Yeah. So it depends because cap rates are switching and obviously trying to comp out a historic Masonic lodge that's an apartment complex with office and storage. Like there's no other comp, like probably even in the United States. So it'll just go based off the NOI and cap rate. But again, that's a rough value. That's not what it would sell for. So basically I'm trying to get it approved, probably have 900,000 into the purchase, the holding costs, the approvals. And then once I could take that, I can use that for the down payment, the construction loan. Right now, it's probably going to be a $3 to $4 million build out based on what I can see. And then that'll be at 75%. So hopefully around 5 million or so. But again,
Got it.
really rough numbers. And like I said, I'm not going to sell it. So I'll never really know the true value. Like I just struggle with another appraisal on a 4 unit that I'm under appraised, which was like the first one in like 3 years for me. But I told them, I was like, well, I know I can get a contract for this number and I'll get 10 buyers. Still doesn't matter. Still came in 75 under. So yeah, to me,
Interesting.
yeah, as long as I have the equity, I don't, I look at like the cash flow, right? If it's a good asset and the cash flow and I'm under that 75% where I don't have to leave more money in the deal, then I'm still kind of looking at like that burr process, right? Being
Right.
creative and yeah.
Are you getting any line of credit on any of your properties once you have
Oh yeah, yeah,
equity?
yep,
Okay.
yep,
With
yeah.
a
Investor properties are pretty much impossible. So, they'll do them, but there's one bank that'll do up to 75% in a second position. But as well as I do, I'm cashing out 75% all day long as it appraises. So I've gotten a business line of credit for my construction company that we flip houses in a remodel. And then I have HELOC on my primary that I maxed out as much as possible on. So I have those. And then I just have unlimited hard money, which all real estate investors do, right?
right.
It's just, if it's a good deal, you'll get the money.
And what are your goals, like looking ahead, for next 18 months to 3 years, kind of where do you see the real estate market going and where do you see your business going with that?
First and foremost, not to go bankrupt on the development deal. um, Outside of that, I'm cautious in the sense of my first downturn was only COVID. I started investing in 2012, so I missed all that mess. And I'll even catch myself sometimes saying prices aren't going to come down. And I'm like, well, if you look at history, they do. So, but it's a supply and demand issue right now. And I think if rates get cheaper, I feel like house prices are just going to continue to rise just because in my market, I know what it costs to build brand new and it's still astronomically higher than what you can get a house at. So, I have that in the back of my mind. But as a real estate investor, I'm trying really hard to take the bump and bruises. Like if we go over budget on a project, not to just keep it. Like, let me just move on. Let me take my lessons and learnings and I'm trying to get more cash, which is always the hardest thing for me, right? If I have money, I want to put it back out. I want another deal. So now I need more money for these bigger development deals because they can, 5% on $4 million is a chunk. So,
Right.
and I can't just go sell 10 more houses, right? It's a lot more money. That's multiple flips to get that money. So I'm keeping that in mind. As always, I'm extremely bullish on 1 to 4 unit properties that cash flow with good debt and a good location and good, property management. That will never change. If I know my numbers and I have good long-term debt and it cash flows, then that's just solid. Same with flips, right? Like I will continue flipping because that generates a ton of cash and I can do it with such low time as opposed to being an agent, right? So I'm still just kicking those things up and then, trying to understand more what it means to be in an election year and what that means for historic purposes and what happens with rates and global wars. So I'm trying to figure out to arm myself right next time this downturn happens and what's going on. So yeah, but yeah, sticking to fundamentals and learning on
Yeah.
top of that.
Yeah, especially it being an election year, I think it'll be interesting to see kind of the direction the interest rate goes, the housing market, and everything with
Mhm.
that. So it'll be very interesting. I was talking to another investor. They do a lot of Facebook ads, and it was interesting that they're trying to host an event, and they said they're going to start pausing their ads like in couple of months because it just like really ramps up for the election year, and then it just like kind of has an impact on their business. So it's like, oh, I didn't even think of that, that how that would impact. Yeah. And then as far as the asset class is concerned, like you want to stick to that 10 to 20 unit properties in your market. That's where kind of your
Yeah,
sweet spot is.
yeah, because I mean, I look at two opportunity, right? Like where my investing strategy before was always single families, where all my friends did multis, I did singles, and they didn't cash flow a lot, but they're a lot easier to manage, and the appreciation went through the roof on them. So I'll still do those, but I think it's I just use them now as pawns for larger development deals, right? Because I didn't know back then when I bought a single or a two or a three that I would sell them for a massive commercial building and then swap that into an 18 unit. So I figure if I can get more pawns, right? Like those deals that I can clear 75 to 100,000 on, that I could buy a $500,000 property value add, that, there's opportunity in that. So I think if I can just line these things up that appreciate over time, yet still cash flowing, still giving me good depreciation, and then I always buying deals that no one wants, right? Like that the Masons I probably sat on market for a year because no one could solve the parking issue. You had to have parking to get anything approved. So once I could solve that issue, now it becomes hopefully a good deal. And I'm looking at other deals that have been on market for even 2, 3, 4 years that are commercial, but how can I do a project that no one else sees or no one else wants? And then, kind of happen, creatively. I mean, one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard from an older real estate investor who was in his 80s. Same thing. He's like, find something that no one else wants. Like he bought a railroad, an old railroad brick, and no one wanted it. It was on the MLS for like 900 days. He bought it for like pennies, and now he puts advertisements on it, and 15,000 cars pass through it a day. So, oh, cool. So
Interesting.
yeah, yeah, looking at deals like that, and then hopefully those deals don't, I'm not buying them on hopes and dreams as well, because I think those are the ones that you could get sideswiped on too. So
Yeah. And then is you when you're making offers on these, if they've been sitting, if they've been on the market for 90 days plus, are you coming in with a low offer? If you feel like, oh, it's priced pretty competitively, then you're just coming in with the right offer. Like the one that you purchased for 350, what was it listed for on the market?
500.
500.
Yeah.
And did you
Yeah, but it was
start at
not,
like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you kind of that one was unique where it was, no one else could buy it realistically. So I knew a price you start at is going to be a lot lower. They actually accepted the 350 offer. So they could have,
Mm.
they may have been lower, but I still
Right.
thought that was a great deal. And, I offered I got paid as an agent too. So I got a commission on that. But as far as like the single families and the small multis, I'll call an agent, have a good rapport, try to figure out as many details as I can of the situation. I mean, most of them now are actually probate deals, which I never really bought a lot of, but now I'm buying more.
Probate on MLS.
Yeah, so someone will pass away and then there's an executor and they'll handle the estate. So they're not emotional. They have a number. They can't budge from it typically. So, I'll start with a range, right? If they're asking 200, I might have to be at, 150. So I'll be like, well, I could probably do 130, 150. So I'll throw out a range, right? No specifics, but based on, getting my contractor in there and getting a tighter scope, is that something that's going to work for the seller? And I'll just
Got it.
wait to get a response. Yeah. Um, and that's one of my best lines ever is like, and I think I learned it from an investor like 5, 6 years ago at an event. I forget who her name was, but she's like, "Hey, is it worth me getting in my car going down to my office to write up an offer for?" You know,
Right.
so just trying to fish and see if that works. If the agent's good, you can go back and forth verbally. Some agents are just old school and are like, well, it's not an offer until it's in writing. So it just depends on, if I think that's worth my time. So,
Got it. Okay.
yeah.
And do you do anything with expired listings? I know a lot of investors go after that expired listing. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Being an agent and also an investor.
I came up as an agent, as an investor first. So I don't do any marketing. I don't do any CRMs. I don't do any, I have a website, but I created it, where I know I should do those things, right? I like that's 101, calling expireds. Like that's all real estate 101 as an agent to get more leads. And then working, once you get your license, you're not getting paid for a year or two. You're doing a couple deals, then it just goes crazy after that. You build out your network, and then all those buyers that you work with now become sellers, and then they buy a bigger home. So you have these seasons that go through, and then you could choose to be with a team. But yeah, there's all those creative options, as marketing to certain lists, things like that. So that's what I'm actually focused on going forward too, is using the CRM and trying to create that, just because now that I can handle more deals, now I need more lead flow. Whereas opposed to before where it's like, well, I don't have enough capital to do that many deals.
Right.
So 1 to 2 a year was fine, and they're, ample.
Scott, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you if they want to connect with you, offline and learn a little bit more about kind of what you are doing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, always email is probably best. Phone call. Email Scott at davidwesleyrealestate.com. And yeah, we're out of Central Connecticut. So,
Cool. Yeah, and we'll put link to that in the call recording also. We get a lot of people that go back and listen to the call recording. All right, Scott, any last words of wisdom to the group looking
um,
back at like 12 years of investment? Like if you had to give last some lessons learned.
I think time kind of heals all, right? Like if you stick to the principles of good property,
Sure
good
does.
cash flow, and good
Yeah.
debt, time is huge. That's what I'm learning. I'm like, when going back and looking at the real estate crash of 05, 06, looking at the dot-com bust, looking at the savings and loan crisis, and going back in history and studying those things and trying to learn and see what house prices did, and trying to zoom out of like, oh yeah, well, we're paying 6, 7, 8% debt on 30-year loans. So expensive. But that's a historic average. So it's
Right.
actually pretty cheap debt. So I've always been a fan of always being a buyer, as long as you're doing it appropriately, right? Same principles. So just stick to those and get as many as you can comfortably. And like you said, when 5, 10 years goes by and you have 10, 20 houses, with that much equity, you can do a lot more creative things.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Scott, thank you so much for being on the call and for your time. All right, everyone else, thank you so much for being on the call. I'll see you guys on the next week call. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Rad.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.